I was at the peak of my world, basking in the spotlight I'd built for myself. Then my housewife stepped onto the stage and utterly dismantled it all. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and self-congratulation. I breathed it in like oxygen. The clinking of champagne flutes was the soundtrack to my victory, a prelude to the moment my name would be called for the Innovator of the Year award. I smoothed the lapels of my custom-tailored tuxedo, a small smile playing on my lips. This was my world. These were my people. Tech giants, venture capitalists, digital prophets. We were the new gods, and tonight I was ascending to Olympus. My wife, Clara, sat beside me, a silent, beautiful accessory. She looked lovely, of course, in that understated, elegant way she had. The deep blue dress I'd picked out for her complemented her eyes, but she seemed to wear it like a costume, a temporary disguise for a woman who was more at home with laundry lists than with networking. She nursed a single glass of water, her gaze drifting over the glittering crowd with a quiet detachment that I used to find endearing. Now, it just felt a little out of place. She didn't belong here, not really. But a man in my position needed a wife on his arm, and Clara played the part perfectly. She was supportive, unassuming, and never tried to steal the spotlight. "Mark, you old dog. You've got it in the bag," a voice boomed. It was David, a rival VP from a competing firm. He clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes already sizing up the room for bigger fish. "Heard your Q4 projections. Killer stuff." "We do our best, Dave," I said, my smile widening. This was the game. The subtle digs, the feigned camaraderie. I loved it. David's gaze then fell upon Clara. "And this must be the brilliant woman behind the brilliant man. Clara, a pleasure. You look stunning." Clara gave him a small, polite smile. "Thank you, David. It's a lovely evening." Her voice was soft, almost lost in the din of the hall. David, ever the schmoozer, leaned in slightly. "So, Clara, what do you do? Are you in tech as well? Another power couple in the making." I chuckled before Clara could even form a response. I placed a proprietary hand on the small of her back, feeling the delicate fabric of her dress. This was my favorite part, the part where I got to paint the perfect picture of my life. The high-flying executive, grounded by a traditional, devoted wife. It made me seem stable, reliable. My wife. I smirked, giving her a little squeeze. "Oh, Clara holds down the fort. She's the CEO of the household, aren't you, honey? She's a housewife. The most important job of all, right?" The words hung in the air, coated in a slick layer of condescension that only I could fully appreciate. David nodded enthusiastically, buying the performance completely. "Absolutely. Can't build an empire without a solid foundation." He gave Clara a patronizing smile, the kind you'd give a child, before moving on to his next target. I looked at Clara. Her smile was still in place, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. For a fleeting second, I saw something flash in their depths, not sadness, not anger, but something I couldn't decipher. Then it was gone, replaced by that placid calm I knew so well. She just fiddled with the napkin in her lap. I dismissed it. She was probably just nervous. These events were overwhelming for her. Her world consisted of parent-teacher conferences and choosing organic vegetables at the farmer's market. The complex machinations of corporate warfare were beyond her. I thought about her hobbies, the hours she spent locked away in her study, tapping away at her laptop. She called it her writing. I called it her little blog, some online diary about fantasy worlds or something equally trivial. I'd glance in sometimes and see her staring intently at the screen, lines of code and intricate digital maps filling the monitor. "Doodling," she'd say with a shrug if she caught me looking. I never pushed it, kept her busy, kept her mind occupied while I was out conquering the world. It was harmless. The lights in the ballroom began to dim, and a hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight hit the stage, illuminating the host, a charismatic celebrity known for his sharp wit. My heart began to pound in my chest. This was it. "Good evening, innovators." The host's voice echoed through the hall. "Welcome to the annual Tech Innovators Gala. We're here tonight to celebrate the titans, the visionaries, the men and women who are scripting the future. He went through the opening pleasantries, and I zoned out, mentally rehearsing my acceptance speech. I'd thank the board, my team, and, of course, I'd give a touching little nod to my wonderfully supportive wife. It was all choreographed. Now, the host continued, his tone shifting. Before we get to our main awards, we have something special. A new award we're introducing this year. The Digital Pioneer Award. This award recognizes an individual whose anonymous or pseudonymous work has fundamentally changed the digital landscape. An artist whose creation has impacted millions without ever seeking the spotlight for themselves. My interest was piqued, but only mildly. It sounded like some award for a YouTuber or a viral meme creator. The inaugural recipient of this award, the host boomed, is the creator of Ethelgard's World. For those of you who don't know, Ethelgard's World is not just a game. It's a universe, a sprawling, text-based interactive narrative with a branching storyline so complex that it's estimated a single user would need 500 years to explore every possible path. It has over 30 million active users, its own economy, and its lore has been hailed by literary critics as the most significant piece of collaborative fiction of the 21st century. All of this was built by one person, working under the pseudonym Ether. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I'd heard of Ethelgard's World. A few of our junior coders were obsessed with it. I dismissed it as nerd stuff. For years, the identity of Ether has been the biggest mystery in tech, the host said, a dramatic pause hanging in the air. A complete ghost. But tonight, the ghost is stepping into the light. For the first time ever, she has agreed to accept this award in person. Ladies and gentlemen, the creative genius, the digital pioneer, the architect of worlds known as Ether, is Clara Vance. The name echoed in the vast, silent space that had suddenly opened up inside my head. Clara Vance. It was a name I knew, a name I owned, a name on our joint bank account. It was not the name of a digital pioneer. It was the name of the woman who reminded me to pick up my dry cleaning. The host had to be mistaken. Prank, perhaps. A terribly unfunny, elaborate joke at my expense. I turned to Clara, ready to share a look of bewildered amusement, to whisper, "Can you believe this idiot?" But the woman I turned to was not the one who had sat down beside me. The quiet, placid mask was gone. In its place was a calm, unnerving certainty. A single, perfectly shaped eyebrow was slightly raised, and a small, knowing smile, a real one, not the polite, empty thing she gave to David, played on her lips. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the stage, on the spotlight that was now sweeping across the tables, searching, and finally landing squarely on her. She didn't flinch. She bathed in the light as if she were born in it. The silence in the ballroom broke like a tidal wave. It started as a ripple of confused murmurs, then swelled into gasps, and finally erupted into a roar of applause so thunderous it vibrated through the floor, up my chair, and into my bones. The entire hall was getting to its feet. Not for me, for her. The tech giants, the venture capitalists, the digital prophets, my people were standing and applauding my housewife. Clara placed her napkin neatly on the table. Then, with a grace I had never seen before, she stood up. The simple blue dress I had picked out no longer looked like a costume. On her, under the bright white light, it looked like royal attire. She gave a small, dignified nod to the room, a monarch acknowledging her court. My mind was a maelstrom of fractured images and half-formed thoughts. Her study. The door always closed. The low hum of the high-end computer I'd bought her as a casual gift, assuming she'd use it for online shopping. The strange, complex diagrams I'd once seen on her screen, which she'd quickly minimized, calling them patterns for a new quilt. A quilt. The late nights she was reading. The times I'd come home, drunk on my own success, and found her eyes bright with a fierce intelligence, a fire I'd dismissed as a reflection from her screen. Doodling, she'd said. Ether dash. The name even sounded ethereal, otherworldly. It was the perfect disguise. She started walking towards the stage. Each step was deliberate, poised. My world, once so solid and predictable, had turned to liquid glass, and I was watching it shatter in slow motion. My smirk from minutes ago felt like a brand on my face. My wife? Only a housewife. The words replayed in my head, a demonic chorus set to the sound of 1,000 people cheering for her. I felt the blood drain from my face. I could feel the eyes of people at nearby tables flicker towards me, their expressions a cocktail of shock, pity, and morbid curiosity. On stage, she shook the host's hand, her grip firm. He handed her the sleek, crystal award, and she held it like it was an extension of her own hand. When she stepped up to the microphone, a new kind of silence fell. It wasn't the quiet of anticipation for a corporate speech. It was the hush of reverence. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was different. Amplified by the microphone, it was no longer the soft, gentle murmur I was used to tuning out. It was rich, clear, and carried a weight that pinned every person in their seat. I'm not used to this." A soft, genuine laugh rippled through the audience. For the last 10 years, my world has been one of code, of narrative branching, of silent creation. My name was Ether, and in Ethelgard that was enough. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the sea of faces, all of them rapt. Someone once said that necessity is the mother of invention. For me, it was solitude. I built a world because I needed one to exist in. A world where creativity wasn't a hobby, where passion wasn't a cute little distraction, where a person's worth was measured not by who they were married to or what parties they attended, but by the worlds they could build, the stories they could tell. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and I was her target. My throat was dry, couldn't swallow. I felt a cold sweat break out on my brow. She wasn't just accepting an award. She was delivering a verdict. On me, on our life. She continued, speaking of the joy of creation, the community that grew around her work, the millions of people who found a home in the world she built from her little study while I was out building my empire. And then, she turned her eyes from the crowd and found me. Across the vast ballroom, through the glare of the lights, her gaze locked with mine. The small, knowing smile returned to her lips, but this time it was laced with ice. "And finally," she said, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate, yet every syllable was a thunderclap in my ears. "I need to thank my husband, Mark." The camera swiveled to find me. The spotlight I had craved all night was finally on me, exposing me. Hundreds of heads turned in my direction. Clara held the gaze, holding me, the camera, and the entire room captive. His constant, daily reminders of what my place in the world was, she said, her voice smooth as polished steel, gave me the perfect, quiet little box to build my universe in. "So thank you, Mark. You made it all possible." The words hung in the air, a perfectly crafted eulogy for my ego. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, a scattering of claps from people unsure if they had just witnessed a touching tribute or a public execution. Then, as the sheer, savage brilliance of her statement settled in, the applause grew, not with the warmth of before, but with the sharp, crackling energy of a crowd that knows it's witnessing history. They were applauding her genius, yes, but they were also applauding her audacity. They were laughing at me. I sat frozen, a statue in a bespoke suit. The camera's red light was a cyclops's eye, unblinking and merciless. My face, I could feel, was a pale, slack mask of disbelief. The smile I tried to form felt like it was cracking my skin. I wanted to stand. I wanted to run. I wanted to rewind time by 10 minutes and simply not exist. But my limbs were filled with lead, my joints fused together by sheer, unadulterated humiliation. Clara walked off the stage, the crystal award in her hand glinting like a weapon. The host, for his part, looked utterly flabbergasted, fumbling with his cue cards before quickly announcing a short intermission. It was a mercy killing. As the house lights came up, the low hum of conversation immediately swelled, charged with a single topic: me, and the housewife who had just decapitated me in front of the entire tech industry. People avoided my gaze. David, my rival, shot me a look from across the room that was a toxic blend of pity and pure, unholy glee. He raised his glass in a mock toast before turning away, already deep in conversation, no doubt recounting my "only a housewife" comment with theatrical relish. I was no longer a player in the game. I was the punchline. The journey back to our table felt like the longest walk of Clara's life, but for me, it was a terrifyingly short eternity. Each step she took was another nail in my coffin. She moved with a newfound power, a magnetism that drew eyes from every corner of the room. They weren't just looking at her anymore. They were seeing her. And in seeing her, they were seeing my blindness, my arrogance, my utter foolishness. When she reached the table, she didn't sit down. She simply stood there, looking at me. The quiet, unassuming woman I thought I knew was gone. In her place stood Ether, the architect of worlds, and her expression was one of cool, dispassionate evaluation, as if she were deciding which narrative branch to follow next. Clara, I managed to choke out. The name felt foreign, inadequate. I don't understand. That's the problem, Mark, she said. Her voice now back to its softer tone, but it was a deceptive quiet, like the calm at the center of a hurricane. You never did. She placed the award on the table between us. It stood there, a crystalline monument to my ignorance. 10 years, Mark. 10 years I've been Ether. The first line of code for Ethelgard was written on our honeymoon, while you were on a conference call. My mind reeled. Our honeymoon in Tuscany. I had been closing the seed funding for my first startup. I'd praised her for being so low maintenance, for happily reading by the pool for hours while I worked. She hadn't been reading. She had been building. The little blog? I whispered, the words tasting like ash. The doodling? Was a multi-million-dollar enterprise with a dedicated server farm that I paid for myself. She finished, her voice flat. The income was routed through a shell corporation I set up in my maiden name. It was quite simple, really. You never paid much attention to the details of my life, as long as your shirts were ironed. The accusation was so direct, so true, it stole the air from my lungs. Every memory of the past decade was recontextualizing itself in my mind, shifting from a portrait of my success to a chronicle of my obliviousness. Her requests for faster internet. Her trips to visit her sister that coincided with gaming conventions. The unexplained wire transfers in our old bank statements I dismissed as her online shopping habits getting out of hand. It was all there, a whole universe hidden in plain sight, and I had been too busy admiring my own reflection to ever look down. Why? I asked, the question sounding pathetic even to my own ears. Why didn't you tell me? A dry, mirthless laugh escaped her lips. Tell you? Mark, what exactly would I have told you? That my silly little hobby was more innovative and profitable than the app you were developing to rate gourmet toast? I tried, years ago. I showed you an early build. You glanced at it for 5 seconds, patted my head, and said, "That's nice, honey. Is dinner ready?" The memory hit me like a physical blow. It was real. I remembered it. A screen full of what looked like gibberish to me. A flicker of excitement in her eyes that I had casually extinguished. She picked up her small clutch from the table. I have to go. I have a press conference. Apparently, a few people are interested in talking to the woman behind Ether. She turned to leave. Panic seized me. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't just walk away and leave me in the wreckage. Wait, Clara, wait. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Where are you going to go? She stopped and turned back, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than cool composure in her eyes. It was a flash of pity. Home, Mark, she said softly. I'm going home. Relief, potent and undeserved, flooded through me. Home, our home. We could fix this. We could talk. I could apologize. I could figure out how to spin this. Power couple. Yes, that was it. I had known all along, of course, and was just protecting her privacy. The narrative was already forming in my head. Good, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I'll meet you there after this is over. Clara's pitiful smile widened slightly. I think you misunderstand. I'm going to my home. The one I bought 2 years ago in the hills. The one with the fiber optic connection and the soundproof studio. She paused, letting the words sink in, twisting the knife. Then she delivered the final blow. The movers are coming to your house tomorrow morning to pick up my things. You should probably be there. They'll need someone to let them in. The ballroom became a blur. The shocked faces, the cacophony of whispers, the clinking glasses. It all faded into a dull, roaring static in my ears. The only thing in sharp focus was Clara's back as she walked away, not with the hesitant shuffle of the woman who used to follow 2 steps behind me, but with the confident, purposeful stride of a queen leaving a conquered territory. She didn't look back. I sank back into my chair, my body a dead weight. The Innovator of the Year award, the pinnacle of my ambition, was still to be announced, but I already knew I hadn't won. It didn't matter who they called to the stage. I had already suffered the most profound loss of the night. My victory had been stolen, my future had been rewritten, and my past had been revealed as a pathetic fiction I had told myself for 10 years. I don't remember how I got out of there. I have a vague memory of fending off a smirking journalist with a mumbled no comment, of avoiding David's venomously sympathetic gaze, of grabbing my coat from a bewildered attendant. The drive home was an automated process, my hands on the wheel but my mind a million miles away, lost in the smoldering ruins of my life. Our house, my house, I corrected myself with a bitter pang, was dark and silent. It had never felt so large, so empty. Every tasteful piece of furniture Clara had chosen, every piece of art she had hung, now seemed to mock me. They were relics of a life I hadn't truly lived, props on a stage where I was the only one who didn't know his lines. I walked straight to her study. The door, usually closed, was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. For the first time, I wasn't just glancing in. I was entering her world. The room was sparse, functional. One wall was covered in a massive corkboard, crisscrossed with lines of yarn connecting hundreds of index cards. There were character names, plot points, historical timelines, intricate maps drawn with an artist's precision. It looked like the war room of a brilliant general. Her high-end computer was still on, the screen glowing. On it wasn't a blog, but a complex coding interface, lines of green and white text scrolling endlessly. This was the engine room of Ethelgard. This was her soul, and I had called it doodling. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night pacing the silent house, fueled by a toxic cocktail of rage, shame, and a bewildering sense of grief. I was furious at her for the deception, for the public humiliation. But underneath the anger was a gnawing, hollow feeling. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my wife. I was grieving the loss of a woman I had never even known. The brilliant, passionate, powerful creator who had lived beside me, completely invisible to my self-obsessed eyes. The movers arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. A big yellow truck pulled up, and a team of efficient, unsentimental men started carrying out boxes. I watched, numb, as they took her things. I realized with a jolt that most of the boxes were already packed, hidden away in closets and the attic. She had been planning this for months, maybe years. The award ceremony wasn't the cause of our separation. It was just the closing scene she had written for it. They took her books, her clothes, the contents of her study. Then they started taking other things. A painting from the living room, a specific armchair, the expensive espresso machine I thought I had wanted. With each item that left the house, a man with a clipboard would approach me. "Mr. Vance, this is listed as a corporate asset of Ether Corporation. Can you sign here, please?" Corporate asset. She had bought everything through her company. I was living in a house furnished by a corporation I didn't even know existed. My humiliation was a well with no bottom. Finally, after 2 hours, the house was stripped of her presence. The lead mover handed me the clipboard for the final signature. As I scrawled my name, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my banking app. I glanced at it. Transaction alert. Your joint savings account has been closed. Funds transferred. $1,250,034.50. I stared at the number. It was the entirety of our joint savings, our nest egg. Gone. A second notification popped up. Email from Clara Vance. My hand trembled as I opened it. The subject line was simple: final arrangements. The email was short, devoid of emotion, as clinical as a financial statement. Mark, the funds from the joint account have been moved to a trust for our son, Leo, for his college education. Since you handled all our finances, you may not have been aware that the vast majority of those funds came from my earnings over the last 7 years. I have the documentation to prove it. Regarding the house, our prenuptial agreement, which your lawyer drafted, states that in the event of a divorce, all assets revert to the original purchaser. As I'm sure you've forgotten, your finances were tied up in your startup when we bought it, so the down payment and all subsequent mortgage payments were made by me through my company. I have the deeds. I will be selling the property. You have 30 days to vacate. I trust this is all clear. Don't try to contact me. My lawyer will be in touch. Clara. 30 days. 30 days to leave the home I thought was mine. My phone slipped from my nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. The prenup. I remembered it now. I had insisted on it, a smart business move to protect my future assets. I'd been so proud of my foresight. I never once considered that she might be the one with the assets to protect. The movers were gone. The silence of the half-empty house pressed in on me. I was ruined. Not just publicly, but financially. My company was highly leveraged. My personal wealth was tied up in stock options that hadn't fully vested. The cash, the house, that had been my safety net. And she had just taken it. Not out of spite, I realized with a sickening clarity, but with the cold, hard logic of a business transaction. She was just reclaiming her assets. A car pulled into the driveway. For a wild, desperate second, I thought it was her, that she'd come back, that this was all some horrible, elaborate lesson. But it wasn't Clara's car. It was a sleek, black town car. A woman in a sharp suit got out of the back. She was holding a leather briefcase and walked towards my front door with an air of grim purpose. I recognized her instantly. It was Melinda Croft, the most feared divorce attorney in the state. Clara's lawyer. But she wasn't alone. As she reached the porch, the back door of the car opened again. A small figure hopped out. He had a backpack slung over his shoulder and a familiar shock of brown hair. It was my son. It was Leo. He was supposed to be at school. My heart, a bruised and battered organ, gave a painful lurch. Leo! In the cataclysmic implosion of my own life, I had momentarily forgotten about our 9-year-old son. He ran up the steps, his face a mask of confusion, and stopped a few feet from me. He was looking past me, into the cavernous, half-empty living room. Dad? What's going on? Where's all our stuff? Before I could formulate an answer that wasn't a confession of my total failure as a husband and a man, Melinda Croft was there, stepping smoothly between us. She had the cool, predatory calm of a shark that knows it's in blood-filled waters. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice crisp and professional. I am Melinda Croft, Clara's legal counsel. We need to talk. She gestured towards the black car. Perhaps you could ask Leo to wait in the car? The driver will keep him occupied. I looked at Leo, then back at the lawyer. The world was tilting on its axis. Wait? Where is he going? Where's Clara? Clara is in a series of back-to-back interviews and meetings. She'll be occupied for most of the day, Melinda stated, a subtle but clear emphasis on how important her client now was. She asked me to bring Leo here so he could pick up a few of his things, and so that you and I could have a chat about the new custody arrangement. Custody. The word hit me harder than anything else. Harder than the public humiliation. Harder than losing the house and the money. The thought of losing Leo, of him being just another asset to be divided, was unbearable. I knelt down, my knees cracking on the hardwood floor. I put my hands on my son's small shoulders. Hey, buddy. Mom and I, we're making some changes. Why don't you go with the driver for a little bit? Go pack a bag with your favorite games and your tablet. I'll be right here. Leo looked uncertain, his young eyes sensing the seismic shift in our family's landscape, but he nodded and walked back to the car. I watched him go, then stood up and faced Melinda Croft. Let's talk. We sat in the skeletal living room, on the one sofa the movers had left behind. She opened her briefcase and laid out a sheaf of papers on the coffee table. It was a custody agreement. It was brutal. I would get Leo every other weekend and one night a week for dinner. Major holidays would be alternated. It was a standard, sterile arrangement, but reading it felt like having my ribs pried open. This is unacceptable, I stammered. He's my son. And Clara is his mother, Melinda countered smoothly. She will be providing his primary residence, his schooling, and his health care, all of which she is more than capable of financing. Frankly, Mark, given your impending financial and residential instability, this is a very generous offer. If we took this before a judge right now. She let the threat hang in the air, unspoken but potent. I stared at the papers, at the black and white text that was methodically dismantling my life. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. Not my pride that had been shattered last night. Not my ego that was a smoking crater. It was the dam of denial. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to spin this, how to salvage my reputation, or how to fight back. I was thinking about what I had truly lost. I had lost a decade with a woman I never knew. I had treated her passion as a trifle, her genius as a hobby. I had been so obsessed with the reflection of the man I wanted to be that I had never seen the incredible woman standing right beside me. I hadn't just been oblivious. I had been a fool. And the custody papers weren't a punishment from Clara. They were the logical consequences of my own actions. Okay, I said, the word coming out as a rough whisper. I picked up the pen she offered. Okay. Melinda looked surprised, her professional armor showing the slightest chink. She had clearly come prepared for a fight, for threats and bluster. She hadn't expected surrender. I signed the papers, my signature a shaky, pathetic scrawl. There's one more thing, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. I want to see her. I don't want to talk about lawyers or money or houses. I just need to talk to her. Melinda studied me for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. She made a call. 20 minutes later, I had an address. Not her new home, but a neutral location. A quiet cafe downtown. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting in a booth by the window, nursing a cup of tea. She looked different. Without the ballroom gown, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, she looked younger, less like a queen and more like herself. The ether persona and the housewife persona were both gone. This was just Clara. I sat down opposite her. The silence was thick with unspoken words. I signed the papers, I said finally. She nodded, not looking at me, her eyes on the street outside. I know, Melinda called. Clara, I started, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? I'm sorry, felt like a pebble thrown into the Grand Canyon. I took a breath and forced myself to say what was true, what was real. You were right, I said. About everything. About me not listening. About me not seeing you. I was an arrogant, self-absorbed idiot. I built my entire world around myself, and I never once thought to ask about the universe you were building right next to me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I see it now. I see you. She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were clear, and for the first time in a long time, there was no wall, no mask. I saw a flicker of the woman I had first fallen in love with, the sharp, witty girl in college who could debate philosophy for hours. I saw a decade of quiet pain and lonely creation. Thank you for saying that, Mark, she said softly. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of weariness in it. It means something. What happens now? I asked, dreading the answer. She took a sip of her tea. I don't know. I'm going to keep building my world. You need to figure out how to build yours. For real this time. Not the facade. She paused. And you need to be a father to Leo. Not a weekend Disneyland dad. A real one. He needs you. That was it. There was no dramatic reconciliation. No screaming match. Just a quiet, painful, and necessary end. We sat for a few more minutes in silence, and then she stood up. Goodbye, Mark. Goodbye, Clara. I watched her walk out of the cafe and disappear into the city. I didn't win the Innovator of the Year award that night. My company, without the safety net of Clara's money, struggled and was eventually acquired for a fraction of what I thought it was worth. I had to sell the house, her house, and move into a small apartment. I was, by every measure I had once valued, a failure. But I kept my promise. I was there for Leo, every other weekend, and every Tuesday night. I went to his soccer games and his parent-teacher conferences. I learned to cook his favorite meals. I listened to him, really listened, when he talked about his video games and his friends. And through him, I learned about Ethelgard's world. He showed me the universe his mother had built, and I was awestruck. It was a slow, humbling process, rebuilding my life from the ground up. But for the first time, it felt real. One evening, about a year later, I was helping Leo with a school project on his laptop when an ad popped up. It was for a new, immersive virtual reality experience, the biggest launch of the year. It was called Ether. Below the title, in bold letters, was the name of the creator and CEO, Clara Vance. I looked at the picture of her, confident and brilliant. There was no anger, no resentment, just a profound, quiet sense of respect. My wife, only a housewife, I had smirked. No, she was a creator of worlds. And I was just a man, finally learning to live in the real one.